Missile attacks on the capital of Iraq, Baghdad, as you can see. That is an F-15 plane that we have flying over there. They were launched as well with long-range fuel tanks, probably to hit ground positions, possibly in southern Kuwait, but maybe military targets within Iraq itself. The primary objectives in the first wave appear to have been military installations and probably radar sites, because the radar would be crucial to the Iraqis in responding to any kind of an attack. There are now reports again coming out of Baghdad of a new wave of attacks underway. We do not know what that means precisely at this hour. The center of the city apparently still is intact. Saddam Hussein, where he is at this hour, we cannot say. We presume, of course, that he is in a bunker, possibly somewhere in the Baghdad area, but he could have gone to the mountains. He has retreats there as well. He is battle-hardened, 8 years against Iran. He's a man who fought and killed his way to power, beginning in a very small village in Iraq called Tikrit, and from there he built this enormous political and military power in the most ruthless possible fashion, killing anyone who stood in his way, saying, "I know of the people around me," when they're disloyal before they know. NBC's John Cochran at the White House.
Tom, we're just learning that the president has been working on the speech, which we'll hear later tonight. He's been working on it for 2 to 3 weeks. That gives us a lot of insight into his mindset. Obviously, he thought this was a likely possibility. You don't work on a speech for 2 or 3 weeks unless you think you're going to deliver it, although obviously hoped at the last minute that Saddam Hussein would withdraw his troops and he wouldn't have to go on the air with the speech of about 10 to 12 minutes duration. The few remarks that Marlin Fitzwater had a short time ago, that would be about almost an hour ago now, that was devised in a hurry. The president is still watching a lot of television. Incidentally, one of the reasons around here we suspected there would be no attack today is that Marlin Fitzwater came out to this podium behind me earlier today, this morning, and issued a personal appeal for journalists in Baghdad to leave. And later talking with Fitzwater privately, he said, "Listen, I'm speaking also on behalf of the president. He knows a lot of you guys. He knows a lot of you guys reporting from Baghdad. He's concerned about..."
For the Joint Information Bureau, so far they have referred us to the White House and the Pentagon. But at some point, perhaps we will be able to get additional information. As far as the situation in Riyadh is concerned, about 20 minutes ago or so, we did have air raid sirens going. And as we had been told that we were well outside the range of aircraft, if air raid signs were to go here, it was the possibility of a missile attack. And there is some possibility that those missiles could be carrying chemical weapons. Therefore, most of the people with ABC News and the other networks who are here in Riyadh have suited up into their anti-chemical and nuclear and biological warfare suits with their gas masks handy. Those sirens that alerted us to the possibility of some kind of attack have stopped, and so at this point we are not really certain what to expect next.
Barry, what happens at the moment in terms of command? Does General Norman Schwarzkopf, the supreme American commander in the region, take control, or do the Saudis have control?
Well, as you well know, this has been one of the touchy issues throughout this entire 5-month running up period. I think it's reasonable to assume that General Schwarzkopf is running the show, and I'm sure he is doing everything he can to keep the Saudis in the picture and make them part of it. But clearly, with the more than 400,000 U.S. troops here and the fact that the United States would be in the running of the attack, as it were, General Schwarzkopf can be assumed to be in command.
Barry, do you have any sense whatsoever of how the Saudi Arabian civilian population has responded to the beginning of war? Can you look out your window and see anything? It's what, almost 4 o'clock in the morning?
Well, it's almost 4 o'clock in the morning, and we don't see very much from the windows here, Peter. There are some people who are planning to venture out and take a look. I can tell you that today there has been, a fairly high level of anxiety, but certainly I don't think anything approaching panic. They are quite stoic about it in many cases, saying, if God wills it, they will be fine, and if God doesn't will it, they won't. I think that basically the Saudis particularly for a long, long time have assumed that this day would never happen, that somehow they would be rescued deus ex machina and everything would be fine. So it's perhaps a little premature to predict what their reaction is going to be now that war has actually begun.
Okay, thanks very much, Barry. As you point out, the Saudis have been fairly calm throughout this whole thing, saying the Americans will protect us. So as Barry points out, hearing the air raid sirens in Riyadh, which is about, looking at my chart, about 616 miles to Baghdad, but less to Kuwait, about 332 miles to Kuwait. It's a very long range, as Barry Dunsmore points out, and as one of our military analysts, Tony Cordesman, has pointed out, the Soviet or even the Iraqi refined Scud missile, one of their heavy range missiles, is an inaccurate weapon over such considerable distance, and of course has a very reduced payload. That is to say how much it can carry, but when it is carrying chemical weapons, which of course is everybody's great fear in the region, it needn't be very heavy at all. Ironically, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Admiral William Crowe, who knows the region so well, was saying to us some time ago the very obvious: it is not a dangerous weapon unless, of course, it lands anywhere adjacent to you. And then anything, no matter how heavy or how light its payload is obvious. Back to the White House and Britt Hume.
Surfacing here, Peter, about the decision to do this, how it was made and when it was made. We're told now that the president had decided on this date, and it was set by virtue of the military's priorities, according to military priorities, several days ago, before it was clear whether there'd be some last-minute move by Iraq to comply with the deadline, and that indeed the statement that was read here tonight in the president's name was written yesterday. The president is said to have been watching news reports on the air tonight and to have seen these first reports, which may indeed, and I believe were the ones that we broadcast, and to have remarked to those sitting with him in the little study there that the air raid over Baghdad was happening just according to the schedule, and that was the first word he had heard in the sense of news reports was this evening as he was sitting in the room where he had called the congressional leaders with his top aides.
Okay, Britt, thanks so much. We'll be coming back to you. It is now called Operation Desert Storm. It is an American operation at the outset, but ABC's Pierre Salinger is standing by in London. Pierre, my apologies. Do we think the British have joined this initial phase of the operation?
Yes, we now have confirmation, Peter, from the British Ministry of Defense that the British are involved, that Tornado aircraft are involved in the air raids on Iraq and on Iraqi
yes,
positions in
the
Kuwait.
The siren here is going off again. General alarm.
Okay, that's an interruption from Barry Dunsmore, who is in Riyadh, who says the air raid siren is going off again. Barry, continue.
I just said that the air raid sirens here in Riyadh have begun to go off again, and as I indicated earlier, the instructions we have had are to get into our suits.
Which you sound like you're doing at the moment, are you?
I think, well, in fact, I've got it on, and I've got my mask handy.
If you feel like putting it on, Barry, it's more important that you feel that you put that on if you want to than that you talk to us. So it's your call, as always. Perhaps we'll go away from Barry Dunsmore for just a moment now and let him have a couple of moments to consider his own situation, as people throughout the Persian Gulf are considering their situation tonight.